So let's now look at what are cognitive biases. So, I mean, I've actually there are quite a lot of cognitive biases that act or work or influence our thinking. I've listed a few of them here, and I've also grouped them into selection bias, social bias, process bias, etc. So I obviously will not have time to go through all this. So what I'll do is I'll explain maybe three or four important biases in detail, and but then you have to actually understand cognitive biases a little more detail by doing your own study. Okay. So let's first look at confirmation bias. Now, so why I'm talking about all these biases is once again to kind of recall our discussion. These are the cognitive biases that kind of impact your system one thinking, and these are the ones that kind of causes errors in your system one thinking. So this is an attempt to kind of increase your consciousness about these cognitive biases. Okay. So first one is confirmation bias. So confirmation bias can be actually called as the mother of all bias. So this is something which is so prevalent, and a lot of our discussions or talks or actions work in line with confirmation bias. So here what happens is you have a certain belief, and you will always seek and find evidence that will confirm your belief. Okay, that's one thing, and you will tend to ignore the rest. So that's one thing. So this is also a very powerful bias that this kind of impacts our thinking, even our social situation, by distorting evidence-based decision making. So evidence-based decision making kind of takes a backseat because of confirmation bias. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to kind of state here. Second thing is it becomes very difficult to kind of have a rational discussion on things which are emotional, say religious topics or political topics. It's almost impossible to have a considered or evidence-based discussion because these are emotive subjects, and people would generally take sides and then argue on that particular side. And it's not just religion and politics. You will see other examples from everyday life, like in sports, for example. If you have a favorite team, you would generally, and if there is a foul called against that particular team, you would generally find fault with the referee, stating that in various other cases this was not called a foul or whatever. So that's what we call as a confirmation bias. Same thing about media. Like if you guys have time and if you guys watch television, then what you normally see is that every day they kind of pick one target and then align all energy and all resource to kind of malign or abuse that particular target. There is no information, there is no evidence, there is no news. It's normally only targeting something and then kind of creating a noise around it and feeding into the confirmation bias. We have also heard that certain judicial verdicts get impacted or get formed based on public sentiment. So, in fact, we had a few judicial verdicts which even confirm or said so much that, yeah, keeping in public sentiment in mind, we are kind of taking such a decision. Okay. And the other thing is, in the extreme case of confirmation bias, you also see certain mass delusion. Like, I don't know how many of you know, but at least many years back, there was a case where somebody said that an idol is drinking milk. And then it quickly became a nationwide hysteria in our country. And everyone ran around to collect milk and feed the idol. So anyone who comes with a reasoning saying that even if you give water, it will still suck it in because of capillary action and all that, nobody was willing to listen to it or take a note of that. Everyone were behind the particular delusional belief that, yeah, there's something supernatural happening there. So, and if you look at it, most of the social media is structured around such a confirmation bias. Like if you look at your Facebook feed, you will normally see things which confirm your understanding of how things work. So that's how your feeds are. I mean, I'm sure all of you know that your feeds are manipulated or tailor-made to your taste, and it is also at a next level tuned to tweak your tastes and interests in a very subtle way. Okay. So what happens in all these cases, or what drives confirmation bias, is what is called motivated reasoning. So what that means is we kind of make some ideas or opinions win over the others. So we kind of own those ideas or opinions and then fight on their side. Or what we can call, we get into a soldier mindset. Like we kind of define that, yeah, these are our ideas and our opinion, and then we do whatever, come what may, to kind of defend and defeat the other part. So that's why it is called a soldier mindset. The sad part is that all this happens unconsciously. And whereas we think that we are being fair and objective in our assessment. So, so that's the sad part of this. And the opposite of soldier mindset is scout mindset, wherein you are in an exploratory mode and you're willing to examine evidence that is presented to you and then change your opinion about that. So what we should train ourselves is to consciously cut through prejudices and then be open to uh, evidence which is presented to us. So for this, we have to be curious, we have to be open-minded, and we have also to be grounded. And the most important thing is we have to understand that our self-worth is not tied to some opinions that we have. And it is perfectly okay to change our opinion or change our decision if we see evidence to the contrary. Okay? So, and the other thing on confirmation bias is that typically confirmation bias also tends to make us overconfident, which again leads to mistakes. Okay. So I've kind of put, I mean, I'm not sure whether you guys are familiar with Dilbert. If you're not familiar now, I'm sure you will become very familiar once you get into your corporate life, because most of your corporate life will resemble what is depicted in a Dilbert cartoon. Okay. So yeah, this is just for fun. You can go through this. So basically, Dilbert and the other lady is Alice. So they are having a conversation. And Alice is saying that when she's kind of keeping track of his bullying behavior, because she's keeping track of his bullying behavior, even before he starts saying anything, she kind of records that he's a bully. And in the second case, it is basically about his boss asking Dilbert to make a cost analysis for data center. And he also says that whatever your the outcome of your study is, ensure that you show that it's a good decision. Okay. So next, let us look at what is endowment effect. Now, what is endowment effect? So basically, all of us have a tendency to be attached to things that we own. And this is something that we are trained as children. Like we are given items, or we are purchased and given items which we are told that we have to take care and keep it secure, or we shouldn't give it to anyone and all that. So that kind of creates an attachment to items that we own. And endowment effect is basically the tendency to put a higher value on things that we own than it rationally would otherwise attract. For example, if you have a car which you want to sell in the used car market, you would typically not be happy with the price that you get. Okay? Or when you go to the market to buy a second-hand car, you will think that, yeah, I mean, this car, I mean, why is that fellow asking for such a high price when it is not worth, say, half of that or three-fourths of that. So that is, so attaching a higher value to something that we own is what is called endowment effect. And this is not just on items that we own, it is also on our ideas and opinions. So we typically attach higher value to the opinion and ideas that we have. And this in a way leads to the previous cognitive bias, which I just said, which is your confirmation bias. Okay, so how do we like reduce or fight endowment effect? So one is to employ external agencies. So if you have a used car to or used bike to sell, then you go and get it valued at a third party center. And then of course, then you shouldn't go and argue with him. You should go by, you should kind of recognize that he has no emotional or rational or irrational element which kind of should put your price down. So he will give you a fair value, and then you have to go by his judgment and then take it forward. Similarly, in a lot of other things, we expect the government to be the rational agent. Typically, in a lot of cases, that may not be true because governments also pander to their vote banks and all that. But in general, at a very high level, democracy works on the belief that governments will do what is good for the larger population, and they are expected to be impartial. So that's how you, that's what is endowment effect, and that's how you fight endowment effect. Okay. Now, yeah, this is an example of endowment effect. So this lady there, she has a small shop where she's selling lemonade for 5 cents. But then she thinks that her business is worth 100 million. And her reasoning is that our growth rate supports the valuation. A typical example of